The dry bend of the river had not held water in weeks. Wind traced shallow furrows in the sand, lifting dust in long, curling ribbons that drifted past thorned acacias and bleached stones. The old riverbed, once a seasonal lifeline, had hardened into pale plates of cracked earth. Small animal tracks skirted the basin's edge, but deeper in, no movement stirred. A ranger named Elias was walking the southern edge that morning, following the contour of the bank, his boots sinking slightly where softer sand had collected in gullies. He had come to check on an old watering post, a collapsed barrel once used to support passing herds when the rains were late. But he never reached it. Near the bend, where the river once pooled in early summer, something stopped him. It looked like a shadow at first. A strange dark shape slumped low against the slope. The light was still thin, and the wind had shifted dust over the form, softening its outline. He stepped closer. Not a boulder. Not driftwood. The side of the figure rose slowly, then sank again, a breath so shallow it barely stirred the surface dust. The elephant lay on his left side, one leg stretched down toward the cracked channel, the other curled beneath. His ribs showed in sharp contrast under stretched, dry skin. Dried mud coated the lower half of his body, fused to the cracks in his flank like thin scales. His ears were motionless. His trunk, brittle and slightly folded back on itself, rested near a split stone. Elias crouched slowly, watching for the smallest sign of movement. He saw the subtle pulsing of the temple, the twitch beneath the eye. Alive. Barely. There were no tracks around him, no signs of recent herd activity. The dust told its own story. This elephant had been alone for some time. The only marks nearby were the impressions left by shifting weight, repeated over and over as if the animal had tried to rise in the beginning, then stopped trying altogether. The ranger reached for his radio. "We've got one down," he said quietly. "Adult male. Alive, but not moving. Looks like a few days without water." The reply was a crackle and a promise. Help was coming. By late morning, the sun hung high. The elephant had not shifted. The ground beneath him had started to warm dangerously. Elias used his jacket to shade part of the exposed face and waited without words. Occasionally, he dipped a cloth in his canteen and squeezed droplets near the trunk. Most of it was lost to the dust. 2 hours later, the first vehicle arrived, an old utility truck fitted with a canvas tank and hand pump hose. Another ranger, a vet, and a wildlife handler followed. They kept their voices low, their movements deliberate. No one approached directly at first. Instead, they spread out, observing the angles of the elephant's posture, the shape of his breathing. "Still responsive," the vet murmured, "but no sign of fresh dung." "He hasn't eaten in days. He was walking. Alone," Elias said. "Probably searching for water that never came." They moved slowly around him, laying down damp canvas along the sunward side. Someone placed a shallow bowl near the trunk and filled it with water and mashed banana. The vet leaned in close, brushing flies from the animal's eye with a feather-soft cloth. There was no blink, only stillness. By late afternoon, a rhythm formed. One ranger dampening the canvas every half hour, another preparing fruit mixtures with electrolytes. The vet monitored breath and heart rhythm. The team avoided loud sounds. No one touched the elephant without reason. As the sun began to lower, a breeze returned, offering brief relief. Elias sat near the edge of the slope, watching the wind move the dust in long, spiraling arcs. The elephant's body now carried a faint sheen, not from sweat, but from the repeated damp cloths, the care layered hour by hour. Still, he did not rise. At one point, a field assistant whispered, "Do you think he gave up?" The vet looked at her but didn't answer. Instead, she knelt again near the hind leg and checked for tension in the muscles. "He's holding on," she said softly, "but it's quiet now." All his energy is inward. Evening came slowly. The wind carried cooler air, and the canvas tent was extended to cover more of his side. The stars began to emerge behind low, drifting clouds. Elias stepped closer and crouched beside the collapsed trunk. He whispered only once, "It's okay. We see you." Then he poured the last of his canteen into the dish. An hour passed, and then, barely perceptible, the elephant's ear twitched. Once, then again. His trunk moved a few centimeters, enough to brush the edge of the bowl. The vet noticed and raised her hand. "Still in there," she said. "Still listening." They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. They simply shifted closer, not to touch him, but to stay near. Night settled full. The riverbed fell into silence, broken only by the occasional creak of canvas or buzz of insects. The team rotated watch in pairs, sleeping light and waking often. No one wanted to miss the next movement, however small. Under the stars, the elephant slept. Shallow breaths, faint twitching. The sky above him curved wide and dark. The dust had begun to settle. His body, once a silent shape in the earth, now held traces of water, of hands, of care, and somewhere beyond the ridge, beyond the reach of wind and sight, something else had begun to shift, as if the land itself had noticed. The morning brought little change in light, but enough in rhythm. The sky remained the dull gray blue of a windless dry season, but the quiet hum of early insect calls was joined now by footsteps, low voices, and the soft rustle of tarp unfolding. More vehicles had arrived. Not many, just enough to bring what was needed. There would be no helicopter, no cranes, no noise, only quiet hands, buckets, shade, and time. They began with observation. No one touched him for nearly an hour. The vet moved slowly in a circle around the body, crouching at intervals to watch the rise and fall of the chest, the twitch of an eye muscle, the small tensing near the jaw. A student ranger recorded measurements, not in a rush, just as notes to mark change. The elephant remained still, his ribs shifting like fragile hills beneath stretched, sunburnt hide. His breath came no more than 8 or 9 times each minute, and even that rhythm was uneven. Not dying, but not improving either. The old skin around his flanks had cracked in places, not from injury, but from time spent pressed against dry earth and sun. His temple was bruised slightly where he'd rested too long on one side, and the trunk, once a strong sweep of motion and memory, now lay split near the tip, as if scraped raw from too many attempts to lift himself and failing. "We're behind the point of medical," the vet said softly. "What he needs now is relief." The team agreed without words. They began digging near the bend, shallow sloping trenches that could be filled with water slowly. Not too fast. If the elephant stirred and tried to drink too soon, he might aspirate. Everything needed to happen in slow degrees. They used canvas buckets, a small portable pump, and old plastic piping to redirect flow from the tank. It wasn't enough for bathing, not yet, but enough for moisture, enough for hope. Elias filled his own hands with damp earth and packed it against a shallow wound near the leg, sealing it from flies. The elephant did not flinch. He hadn't responded to anything yet, not the water, the fruit mash, or the slow brushing of flies from his eyes. Later that day, they brought in chopped bananas soaked in salt water and glucose. One of the younger rangers, a woman named Rena, knelt and gently pressed a piece near the elephant's trunk. She whispered, "Easy, boy. We're here now." The trunk shifted slightly, not toward her but toward the damp soil where droplets had gathered. A nostril flared, then settled again. A breath, not deeper but more deliberate. They rotated in silence. One person always beside the head, misting his ears, keeping flies from nesting in the folds. Another at the back leg, watching for twitching, any sign that circulation had improved, and others dug short channels from the trench, letting water fan outward toward the elephant's side so that he could reach it, should he try. As afternoon became evening, they set up canvas sheets as windbreaks. A cluster of dry thorn bushes had been cleared to make space, and a ring of quiet was formed around the fallen animal. Not a camp, not a base. Just a boundary. No one spoke loudly within it. No one moved without thought. There was something sacred about the space now, not in a spiritual sense, but in the way that silence becomes permission, a way of telling a creature, "Stay if you can, go if you must." By dusk, the flies began to thin. A breeze cooled the ground. A small bat circled overhead. The vet returned from a short rest and paused before approaching. "No change?" she asked quietly. "He hasn't moved in hours," Elias replied, "but his breath's a little stronger." "Not much," Rena added. "He sniffed." "Once." "When I brought the mash, that counts." They kept working. One ranger massaged water into the cracked trunk, not forcing it but pressing it in with soft soaked cloth. Another scooped soil out from under the front leg to reduce pressure on the shoulder. These were gestures, not cures, but even gestures mattered here. The sky deepened into indigo. Insects grew louder. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a nightjar called. That's when it happened. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't dramatic. The elephant's right ear, the one pressed close to the dusty slope, lifted. Not fully, just a flutter, a single twitch. Then, a minute later, again, this time with rhythm. Someone gasped quietly, then caught themselves. The vet moved slowly to the head. That's him. That's not reflex. That's choice a pause. The trunk stirred a little. It didn't rise, but it shifted just enough to smear the damp soil. A faint sound came from the throat. Not a trumpet, not a groan. Just a breath with tone. A long exhale, then stillness again. No one clapped. No one celebrated. But in that silence, a kind of awe settled. For hours, they had worked without knowing if it mattered. Now, the body responded. Not with strength, but with awareness. Rena reached forward and placed her hand on the earth beside his face, not touching him, just there. "We'll stay through the night," Elias said, and they did. Each team member took a shift. Even those not on watch slept in their boots, near the canvas, near the waterline. One ranger sang a lullaby under her breath for an hour, though no one asked her to. Another carved a shallow notch in a nearby log. Not a memorial, not yet, just a mark. As midnight came, the sky cleared. The stars hung low. The earth cooled, and beneath the canvas the elephant's chest rose, slow, uneven, but stronger than before. The breath that remained had found its rhythm again. Dawn came without ceremony. The sky shifted from slate to muted gold with no burst of color, just a soft easing of dark into light. The trees remained still. Even the insects seemed to pause. Beneath the canvas, the bull lay as he had through the night, breath low but consistent, trunk curled slightly, ear still flicking now and then. Elias stood on the rise above the trench, scanning the horizon with binoculars. The air was dry but cooler now. They had made it through the second night, and in the silence of that early hour, everything felt fragile, the kind of calm that could break with a single wrong sound. The riverbed below showed the marks of their care, shallow footprints around the waterline, cut trenches in the soil, darkened canvas where misting had continued every hour. A few birds landed nearby, hornbills mostly, drawn to the fruit mash and lingering sweetness. The others were stirring. Rena moved from the supply truck to the trench with a new bucket of glucose water. The vet remained near the elephant's flank, checking again for signs of bloating, heat, or swelling. None of that had come. For now, the worst was still behind them. Then something shifted. Not the elephant. Not the air. It was the ground itself. A faint tremble, subtle and brief. Elias turned toward the ridge. There was no sound at first, only the quiet alertness that came with knowing something was near before it made itself known. Then he heard it. A low, drawn-out rumble, distant, deliberate, and deep. He lowered the binoculars and stepped forward slightly, squinting toward the far ridge where the dry trees broke into scrub. The sound came again, softer this time, but unmistakable. It wasn't thunder, it wasn't mechanical. It was an elephant, then another. By the time the others joined him, 5 figures had emerged from the tree line. Slow, steady, unmistakable. A small herd, backs dusted with soil, ears half lifted against the wind. They stood on the crest of the ridge, facing the riverbed, still as stone. "Where did they come from?" Rena asked, voice barely above a whisper. "No prints on the southern trail," Elias replied. "They didn't come that way." They watched in silence as the herd remained motionless. No movement forward, no feeding, no visible agitation, just presence. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the scent of water, of fruit, and perhaps of something more familiar. The matriarch stood at the center, older than the rest. Her ears were torn slightly at the edges, not from recent injury but age. She had a small smooth patch near her eye. A healed burn, maybe, or the mark of an old infection. Her body was lean but strong. She faced the riverbed with full attention. Then she stepped forward. 1 pace only. Then she trumpeted once, not loud, not piercing, just one clear, rolling note that carried down the slope and into the stillness. No one moved. The sound wasn't a warning. It wasn't anger. It was a call. The bull below didn't react at first. His breath remained even, his posture unchanged. But after a moment, his trunk twitched again. Not just a reflex, but a reach. It moved toward the water dish, then curled back and rested near the soft soil. The matriarch remained still, her front foot braced slightly forward. Behind her, a younger female shifted, stepped to the side, and lowered her head. One juvenile stood between 2 adults, barely visible except for the dark curve of its back and the quick flick of a tail. "They're watching him," Rena said. "They're waiting," the vet added. For an hour, the herd didn't move again. They stood as if carved from wind and dust, always facing the elephant who had not yet risen. Occasionally, one would shift weight from one foot to the other or brush a trunk gently against a neighbor. But they made no sound. No attempt to descend. The team returned to their tasks, slowly, reverently. The presence of the herd changed the air. It felt heavier, not oppressive, but full, as if meaning itself had arrived and settled on the ridge. By mid-morning, the temperature had risen. The vet requested new canvas to shade the other side of the elephant's body. As it was laid down, the bull exhaled a longer breath. Hoarse, but full. He moved again. His front leg flexed once, then settled. The dust shifted beneath his side. His trunk curled, lifted an inch, then dropped. Not enough to rise, not yet. But the herd noticed. The matriarch stepped forward again. 2 paces now. Her ears lifted slightly. A younger bull behind her responded with a low, rhythmic grunt. It was quiet, but it reached them. They were answering his movement, or perhaps calling it forward. Rena placed another mash of banana and leaves near the elephant's trunk, but did not push it close. If he wanted to eat, he would. The air grew warmer. Flies returned in small numbers. And then, without announcement, the matriarch turned her body slowly. Not away, but to the side. She faced the line of trees again, then paused and trumpeted once more, not loud, not demanding. Then she waited. The other elephants followed her lead, forming a line, slow and staggered, their bodies angled slightly back from the ridge but not leaving. They remained there for the next 2 hours, still watching, still waiting. They had come from nowhere, called by nothing the rangers could track, but they were here now. Their presence wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, solemn, and certain. The bull on the ground did not rise, but his ear moved more. His breath deepened once, and when a ranger stepped too close with a bucket, the elephant's foot shifted. Just a little, just enough to press deeper into the soil. That afternoon, the herd remained near, not descending, not disappearing, just there. Their silence said what no one else could. They had come for one of their own, and they would wait. The heat had settled into the valley like breath held too long. The wind no longer moved the dust in wide arcs but pressed it flat against the basin floor. The elephant had not shifted in hours, but his breath came steady now, even in sleep. Each exhale stirred a faint ring of powder around his face. The rangers kept close but still. No more feeding attempts, no more coaxing, only presence. By the 4th day they had learned to work in silence. Every movement was careful, every word murmured. The rhythms of their bodies had adapted to his. Slow, minimal, undemanding. Then, just after the sun cleared the tree line, the matriarch began to move. From the ridge where the herd had held their vigil, she descended slowly, picking a path through the dried gullies and thorned brush. She made no sound as she came, but the change in the air was unmistakable. The younger elephants remained behind her, backs to the sun, tails swaying faintly. One of the rangers stepped instinctively between her and the trench, but Elias lifted a hand. "Let her come," he said. "He's not ours." The matriarch continued. Step by step, her wide feet found the spaces between rocks, between tools, between humans. She did not rush. When she reached the lower slope of the riverbed, she paused just beyond the canvas line, just beyond the reach of hands or rope. She stood there for a long time. The bull had not stirred, but something in the set of his body shifted. An angle in the shoulder, a tremor near the spine. Then, as the matriarch took one more step forward, his head lifted. Not all the way, but enough that his eye found hers. He held it there. Then the trunk moved. It uncurled slowly from the dirt, rising just a few inches. The matriarch extended hers, and for a moment they did not touch. They only hovered, breath to breath. Then she reached forward. Her trunk touched his flank just behind the rib, then his temple. Then, gently, the edge of his chest where the skin had split from sun and weight. Each contact was brief. Not a nudge, not a command. Just a confirmation. You are here. The bull exhaled deeply. The sound was different now. Not the hoarse, fragmented air of a dehydrated body, but something fuller, something intentional, a letting go. The rangers remained frozen in place. The vet, crouched beside a supply bag, whispered, "He knows her." The bull lifted his head again, this time higher. His ears shifted outward. The trunk stretched forward until it rested lightly against her shoulder. She didn't pull away. She didn't push. She just stayed. Then came movement from the ridge. The rest of the herd descended, slowly, in a staggered arc. They made no rush of reunion, no sweeping charge. Instead, they came one by one, circling loosely until they formed a half-moon around the bull. Each kept their distance at first as if waiting for a sign. They didn't trumpet. They didn't call. But the sound of their breathing filled the air. A soft chorus of inhales, of slow footfalls, of earth shifting beneath weight. A younger female stepped forward and lowered her head beside the matriarch. She touched her trunk to the bull's back, just once, then stepped aside. Then another. Then the smallest among them, a juvenile barely the height of his shoulder, pressed close and let out a low, rolling rumble. The sound was so gentle it vibrated more than it echoed. The bull's eye closed for a moment, then opened. He shifted his front legs. The soil broke beneath his movement, cracking gently as his shoulder muscles tensed. The rangers watched, unmoving. One of them murmured, "He's going to try." It wasn't graceful. The first push failed. His front knee folded again. The herd stepped back, but only slightly, giving him space. The matriarch remained where she was, still facing him, still quiet. Then, with another long exhale, the bull tried again. This time, his leg held. He groaned softly, not in pain, but in effort. His body trembled. The rear leg didn't follow yet, but the front was upright now. A breath. Another. The matriarch lowered her trunk and touched his chest again. And this time, he rose. Not fully, not into a proud, towering stance, but onto his knees. Then slowly, his haunches shifted, and he angled into a sitting posture, legs curled under him, breath coming hard and steady. It was the first time he had left the ground in over a week. The rangers said nothing. No applause, no commentary, only stillness. The matriarch stepped forward and placed her body beside his, not pushing, not lifting, just being there. He leaned into her, just slightly. His trunk found her flank again and rested there. The herd began to circle closer now, not crowding but closing the gap. Their shadows moved across his body in soft waves. Dust lifted around them, stirred by their feet, by the warm breeze that had returned. The bull didn't rise further that day. He didn't need to. He had lifted his head. He had answered the call, and he was not alone anymore. The light was harsher that morning, sharp and flat across the riverbed, making even the softest outlines seem brittle. Dust hung in the air, stirred by the weight of waiting. The bull had not moved again through the night, but he had not laid back down either. His body remained upright, limbs tucked beneath him, eyes half closed beneath the thin shade of canvas. The herd had slept standing nearby, their forms barely shifting. They had not eaten, had not wandered, had not strayed. They had formed a quiet wall of presence, not guarding him, not sheltering, but simply being there. By mid-morning, the sun had crept higher, and the earth had begun to harden again. The rangers worked around the edges, checking water, adjusting shade, logging observations, but their focus remained fixed. The matriarch stood directly behind him now, not touching, not coaxing, just there. Her posture was patient, grounded, as if time itself had slowed to match her breath. The bull stirred. His front foot dragged through the dust, testing. Then the hind legs unfolded with trembling force. His weight shifted, and his entire body leaned forward before settling again. It wasn't failure, it was calibration. He tried again. The herd didn't move, but the space between them seemed to change, expanding slightly, as if preparing to receive something. The matriarch dipped her head once, then returned to stillness. And the bull rose. It was not sudden. It was not easy. Each muscle worked against itself, lifting with deliberate effort, bones realigning beneath the strain of starvation and stillness. But he did it. He stood. All 4 feet pressed against the hot, cracked earth. His body swayed for a moment, the skin along his side rippling with the effort of balance. Then he exhaled. Low, long, and deep. The wind picked up just enough to lift a small veil of dust around him, and the herd stepped forward. One by one, they filled the spaces around him, not to crowd, not to assist, but to flank, to join. The matriarch brushed her side gently along his, a single stroke of presence. The young female moved to his other side. The juvenile stepped behind, silent but close. He shifted his weight forward. One step, then another. Each footfall left a shallow imprint, not deep. The ground had hardened again, but the shape of his walk was steady. The herd matched his pace without signaling. They moved together, an arc forming around his weakened frame. The rangers stood at the trench watching. No one held equipment. No one recorded. Elias removed his cap and held it against his chest. The bull walked. He passed the shallow water line, the crushed bananas, the canvas that had shaded him. He moved beyond the place he had nearly died. The prints he left behind were uneven but clear. When he reached the slope where the riverbed rose toward brush and light, he paused. His trunk extended once, brushing the air as if mapping what lay ahead. The matriarch stopped beside him. For a moment, neither moved. Then she walked forward, and he followed. The others moved in unison, forming a slow, rippling current of bodies through the scrub. They did not trumpet. They did not call. Only the sound of shifting weight and the occasional snap of dry grass beneath them. At the edge of the clearing, just before the last rise, the bull stopped again and turned his head slightly. He looked back, not at the rangers directly, but at the riverbed, at the place that had held him. Then he moved on. Behind him, the rangers remained still. The wind passed between them, gentle now, lifting their shirts, carrying the faintest scent of water and fruit. Rena stepped forward and crouched where he had lain. The soil was smoother there now, damp in places, patterned with elephant prints and layered with quiet. "They remembered," one ranger whispered. The vet nodded once, and no one spoke again. As the last of the herd vanished into brush and light, the canvas fluttered in the new wind. The trench water stilled. The banana mash dried in the bowl, but the marks in the earth remained, wide, overlapping, imperfect, and in them something had been carried, something old, something shared, something returned.